During yesterday's earnings call, Elon Musk mentioned that he believed the Model Y could quickly become the best-selling vehicle, truck, or car on Earth, essentially by next year. And on Twitter, he clarified this a bit more, saying that by revenue, he thinks it's pretty likely by the end of 2022, and then by actual total unit sales by 2023. And I do believe it's important to kind of keep in mind the context of this statement. If you listen to the earnings call yourself, you'll hear him say that, it's not a guarantee. This is not a for sure thing happening, but it is a greater than 0% chance. Like, there is a possibility of the Model Y becoming the top seller, but I think a lot of people out there that like to doubt Elon are probably going to take this comment and treat it as an absolute certainty, and if it doesn't 100% happen by the end of next year, they're going to call Elon a liar or incorrect. He's not saying it definitely will happen, he's just saying it's possible, and suggesting that it's possible I don't think is actually that crazy if you think more about production capacity moving forward and less about demand, which I don't think is the fundamental issue with Teslas. Otherwise, they would be still manufacturing cheaper vehicles and lowering prices, whereas more recently, they keep jacking those prices up. They've gone up another $2,000 in the past few months. I don't think that's necessarily something you just do because nobody's ordering your vehicles. And they're still able to report a profit, so that helps as well. But if you think about the fact that Fremont has installed a casting press and they're pumping out Model Ys as fast as possible, and that's basically supplying Model Ys for the entire country and Canada, that's a huge source of Model Y production. But on top of that, they're also ramping Model Y production very, very quickly in Shanghai. That factory basically went up overnight. It was very, very quick, and the crossover segment is a lot more popular in general, and that's no exception in China, which means that as the Model Y production ramps there, it should eventually become the best-selling Tesla of that demographic, and they're probably even going to start exporting Model Ys to different countries around China, and maybe import them to neighboring countries to save on cost, because the profit margins in China are very, very good. And on top of that, we've got two factories under construction right now. Berlin seems to be caught in a little bit of paperwork. It might take longer for it to become operational than we originally thought, but Elon's talking about 2022 here, so I think it's safe to say Berlin will probably be operational by January, hopefully long before then. But that factory is essentially going to have one task and only one vehicle on the checklist of mass production and volume production, which again is the Model Y, except the one in Berlin is going to have the next generation paint shop. It's going to have front and rear underbody casting presses and 4680 structural battery packs that go into these things. So profit margins should be thick, the range should be high, and hopefully the end cost to the consumer over in Europe should be pretty reasonably low. And if that wasn't enough, telling you about all these different factories that are going to mass produce the Model Y, on top of that, Tesla is also hard at work constructing Giga Texas, which is also in the United States, but the main facility that they're working on right now is pretty much just going to be all towards Model Y construction and production. In the shareholder deck, when they showed pictures of the factory, they did not really even mention the Cybertruck at all, which does bum me out about, because obviously I want the Cybertruck to be prioritized and I want those to come out as soon as possible, but at least according to the shareholder deck, it appears that all of the facility they're working on right now is pretty much all basically so that Model Y production can be ramped up further than it already has been. So yeah, two mass producing Model Y factories in the same country. In Berlin is being built to scaled up. I'm sure by 2022 they'll likely be producing hundreds of thousands of Model Ys. And if we compare that to some of the best-selling vehicles on the planet, stuff like the Toyota Camry or the RAV4s of the world or the F-150s of the world that sell really well in the US but not so much outside of that, I do actually believe this is somewhat possible. If Tesla is able to ramp up production at an astounding rate, and it sounds based on the earnings call that they do believe they're around 12 to 18 months away from 4680 volume production, that's going to directly help a lot of the production for Model Y both in Berlin and in Texas, which both hope to be producing their own batteries locally. That should save on cost, and I do believe that because of the crossover segment being incredibly popular and the Model Y likely being the first vehicle to get 4680s before any other Tesla, that makes me think the range on the Model Y could be drastically improved once the volume production of 4680 starts taking effect. As they talked about at Battery Day, this is supposed to improve on weight, it's supposed to improve on energy density, even improve on longevity and charge time, which I personally think means that the long range and performance variants of the Model Y could easily start surpassing 400 miles, and that's when value really starts to sink in, okay? It's not all just about getting the lowest possible price, although it does help to have lower purchase prices. It does help to have an overall value of knowing that you don't have to pay that much more for an EV that's going to have an insanely good range that can compete and compared to that of gas vehicles. And on top of that, it's still a Tesla. You know, you got your futuristic interior, you've got your autonomous driving features, you got the supercharging network, all the things that make it a Tesla. I think this could show a lot of people are willing to spend more on a car that they would normally spend, but because they know they're getting a Tesla and because they know the cost of ownership is going to be substantially lower, they're willing to kind of stretch their budget a tad more. So yes, obviously I do think the Model Y in its current configuration would have a hard time becoming the best-selling vehicle on Earth, because at the time of recording this it costs $51,000 for the cheapest version. But as the 4680s are ramped and as Giga Texas and Berlin come online, I do see that entry-level price probably going down, and I'm hoping that when Texas comes online, and it's probably going to be low volume production at first, it'll start with the performance Model Ys, and then perhaps Fremont could bring back the standard range Model Y, and there would probably be an insane amount of demand for that. A $40,000 model that has a range around 250, you know, it doesn't have to be insanely good, but with having value insanely low like that, and you know the cost of ownership being lower, and on top of that all the practicality of having a hatchback, I can actually say that I believe this could happen. Tesla doesn't always reach the timelines they set for themselves though, so I'm not gonna say it's a for sure happening thing. It's not a guarantee, and I hope people can remember that Elon didn't say it was guaranteed to as well. He's just saying it's very likely, and there's really not any other Tesla that's going to be produced at this insane scale before. I don't think Tesla is going to be making more cars than any other company, but because they have such a simplified lineup and there's not a lot of variances between their vehicles, and the Model Y in my opinion is kind of the perfect Swiss Army knife of all their vehicles. It's got great performance, it's got the good range, it's got the practicality, and it's also got the great value. It kind of checks the most amount of boxes for everyday people, which is why I see the Model Y selling so well. And the Model Y is so scalable in other demographics. You know, like I'm a huge fan of the Cybertruck, and I think that the Cybertruck's probably the best in regards to utility and price and range and performance and practicality and all that, but it's such a big vehicle, and that type of large pickup truck only really sells well in the United States. Outside of that, these types of trucks are not going to sell that well in the European demographic, and they might do okay in China, but definitely I don't think as well as the United States. They might have to tinker it a lot to fit the Chinese demographic. So Model Y, however, kind of fits all these demographics pretty comfortably. I mean, in Europe they do like a bit smaller vehicles, but the Model Y I still think is small enough and compact enough to fit in most everyday lives for the European customers. The Model Y is already selling incredibly well in China, kind of disrupting all the EV competition there, and it's that basic same model across all these different demographics. And the simple fact that Tesla is already working and committing to making assembly lines and factories for just this one model across 3 different continents, I think that alone will make it the top selling vehicle, simply because Model 3 is only going to be produced in the immediate future out of Fremont in China, and there's really no confirmation or word on when the Model 3 will be produced elsewhere, whether it'll be in Texas eventually, or will Berlin ever start producing the Model 3, or is Tesla going to bypass bringing the Model 3 to more factories and just go straight to Model 2 production, the $25,000 Tesla, because they know that is the only thing that's probably going to beat the Model Y in terms of total units shipped, and that's going to fit a lot of demographics and become very affordable to more people that want to buy Teslas but can't for their own financial reasons. I could see a compact Tesla doing very, very well in Europe as well as China. They don't sell as insanely good in the United States as the crossovers and pickup trucks, but I could easily see Model 2 being prioritized at these newer factories that aren't done yet over Model 3, and of course over Cybertruck, which is not going to be as top priority as Model Y in demographics like China and Europe. So for all these reasons, I completely agree with Tesla. I think the Model Y will be the best seller by far, and on a personal note, I think it should be. You know, having been in the Model Y many, many times and driven them myself, and I've gotten very familiar with the vehicle as a whole, it is an absolutely fantastic product. It's a delight to drive. It has insanely good acceleration. I love how comfortable the range numbers are already, and knowing they're just going to get better gets me excited. There's a ton of added use space in that back, and they're just barely cutting it with the 7-seater option, but the fact that they do have one, I do think gives it a little bit of a leg over vehicles like the Mach-E and the ID4. Can adults fit in that third row in that 7-seater option? Not really. I've tried myself, but it does make sense for most people who have 7-seaters, which are people who have kids, and for kids and shorter people that want to get into the back, it's probably not that bad, and I've heard that myself from people that can fit back there fairly comfortably. My wife is someone who is a pretty big advocate of that third row, and I can't think of another Tesla for a long, long time that's going to check as many boxes as the Model Y does, and also be as scalable as the Model Y Y is to more and more demographics, and it's not as big a battery hog as the Cybertruck, you know? This channel kind of revolves around the Cybertruck because of how unique it is, but at the same time, it's gonna take a lot of batteries, even for the dual motor variant. To go 300 miles but have a vehicle that large, that's gonna take a lot of energy, whereas the Model Y can take a pretty big cargo capacity, a good amount of people, and also not be too much of a bottleneck on battery constraints. And I think that's what Tesla loves about it, and that's why they're prioritizing it, and that's why they're putting such an emphasis on scalability with the casting press and putting the 4680s in the Model Y first before pretty much everything else. It makes a lot of sense to me. So, anywho, do you guys think it's possible for the Model Y to become the best-selling vehicle by next year or the year after? Or do you think we got many, many years before a Tesla gets up in those types of numbers? Feel free to let me know. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.